Keffals debated a monarchist, and not just any monarchist. I don't know if you saw this guy. His face was going viral on Twitter the other day because of his very unique facial hair, and I can appreciate a man of good facial hair. Here's the guy. So he's a monarchist. I don't think that will surprise anyone if you take a look at him, and I'm not saying that to be mean, just being honest. Alan Nix, thank you so much for the tier 1 and being sub for 9 months. I'm starting to think Biden doesn't really care about Ukraine. If he did, he should have sent ATACMS already, or we would have sent American troops in Ukraine as soon as Russian troops building up troops on Ukraine border. That's not, no, okay. At least the first one, I could kind of agree with you that we should have sent ATACMS, but I don't think that means he doesn't care about Ukraine. And you, as president, sell putting American troops in Ukraine fighting a nuclear power directly. Do that, sell that to the American public. 16% of Americans support it. 16. Try to do that going into an election season. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck doing that. And I'm just being honest. I'm just being honest. Some of the most rabidly pro-Ukraine Americans are not going to commit to that. I don't think there's a single person in the Senate or House who has said we should do that. So, like, I don't know if like saying that because he doesn't support that doesn't mean he supports Ukraine. I mean, then that means the majority of Americans who support Ukraine don't really support Ukraine. It's silly. Anyway, this guy is a monarchist, and he also has a position on a human pet that I don't know anything about, that people were trying to talk about. I saw people talking about on Twitter. It was like a hypothetical, but then he says, I watched like 1 to 2 minutes of this debate, but in this debate, he like it kind of sounds like he does want a human pet. It's very, very strange. Anyway, let's watch the debate. It's very strange. Meeting anybody that's an unironic monarchist now, definitely living in democratic societies, it feels, I don't know, LARPy. But let's see what he has to say.
Honestly, I think I might just call it. I mean, I am exhausted. Cybersmith is here? Okay, wait a second. Cybersmith, what is your Discord? I want to talk to you. Your Discord is just Cybersmith? Okay. I have sent the friend request. I have to change the stream title, I guess. Why am I having an unprompted conversation with the human pet guy? I'm not doing that. That's a stupid idea. I'm just gonna.
Does anybody know the context of the human pet thing? Because he tries to talk about it in like the opening salvo of this conversation, but then immediately will not answer if he wants a human pet. And so it made it very suspicious. I don't know if anybody knows the background or could fill me in. That'd be helpful. But it probably isn't necessary for this conversation.
End the stream. Good night, everyone. Why not? Okay, fine. Hello.
Hello.
I did want to, because I actually don't know much about you. And I was actually curious. Why do people keep calling you the human pet guy?
Oh, that.
Cybersmith, also known as the human pet guy, is an internet personality in lolcow. Oh god, being identified as a lolcow is not good. Primarily known for his views on human pets, Cybersmith first went viral for 2017 Tumblr post in which he defended his hat against accusations of it being a fedora, and then segued into a hypothetical proposal that having a forcefully disabled human pet would not infringe on other people's liberties. Cybersmith's presence on X led to several users unknowingly sharing his selfies, learning about his internet history, and gaining him renewed significance in August of 2023. Forcefully disabled? Okay. Nothing phases me anymore.
A few years ago now, I made a thought experiment in an ethics debate, and people took it out of context. It would be like calling Schrödinger cat poisoner, or calling Jonathan Swift the baby eater because of a thought experiment.
So wait, you don't actually have a human pet or want a human pet, but it was like a thought experiment and people just rolled with it?
Yeah, it was a thought experiment. I wouldn't have room where I'm currently living for human pets.
But you don't want one, or you wanted one? I
think that's outside the scope of this discussion.
You couldn't have possibly said something that sounds more like I desperately want to own another human being than the way he dodged that question. He could have not confirmed to me. Even if he would have said, yes, I want one, that would not have been as much of a confirmation as how he said it here, because how he said it here makes me believe that he means it genuinely and it isn't just like a lolcow position for attention.
I see. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm just letting you.
Like if somebody like, Dylan, do you want a human pet? No. It's not in the scope of the conversation, but I'm happy to answer it too. Nope. Don't want a human pet. Can barely take care of a cat. You want me to take care of a person? Yeah, no, I'm good. Plus, I don't want to have that type of power over another person.
You know.
Fair enough. I was actually quite impressed Gremlo never brought that up, but it seems that any time I discuss politics with people, they seem to want to bring that up. But I had
Gremlo is some internet lolcow. I mostly know him for saying that the reason that I don't like rap music is because when I was very, very young, I was inappropriately touched by a black person. And so he tries to connect my earlier life trauma with me not being a fan of rap music that much. I like folk music. I'm just like a long-haired hippie. It's not really that complicated.
A discussion with Gremlo recently in which he didn't bring it up.
I mean, it's an
wait. That wasn't Gremlo. That was Charmhole. That wasn't Gremlo. No, fuck. I got them mixed up. That was Charmhole. That wasn't Gremlo. I got people mixed up. Sorry. Gremlo was different. Gremlo's different. I don't know anything really about Gremlo. I've rated them a few times. I don't know anything about him.
Interesting part of who you are. I mean, like, whenever I talk to people, they ask me fucking insane questions. There's a lot associated with who I am.
I would guess what you are most associated with, I guess in general, would be your your backstory with Kiwi Farms, and more recently you accused Mommy Big Dick of having committed sexual assault.
Mommy Big Dick. That's an internet moniker.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the thing. A lot of the content you've done is other left-wingers cancelling you. Or you cancelling other left-wingers. I just say, honestly, are your core values so incompatible with the right that it wouldn't be worth, crossing the aisle, so as it were, just because, I mean, you'll get more done. What you'll be doing will be different. You may be perhaps advocating for a return to feudalism instead of whatever it is you currently advocate.
A return to feudalism. Why would people not want to own the land that they work?
Well, but you'd be able to get more of that done because you wouldn't constantly have to worry about people cancelling you.
I mean, most of the people who go after me are incapable of canceling me. Like, they don't share an audience with me. The people who they engage with will never respect me. And a lot of them I don't even consider to really be on the left. Like, I definitely wouldn't consider the Chinese government a leftist government, or people...
I mean, like, if we're talking about a return to feudalism, we're literally saying that nobles own people and the land that they work on. You're not allowed to leave that land and stop working on it. A return to feudalism would mean a complete backtracking of like 90% of our like civil liberties. I mean, like freedom of movement is unbelievably important for a free society.
Who support authoritarian governments.
What do you mean you wouldn't consider? We're talking about Red China, yes, not Taiwan. Red China. Of course, they're left wing. Their main political party literally has the word communist in its name.
Right, but what makes them left-wing? Is it just a
National Socialist Workers Party. I'm sorry, I just want to throw that out there quick. I mean, like, how communist, like, in China, private property is enshrined in the Constitution. That was something that was done in, like, the 70s or 80s, right? Now, I don't want to be the person to tell you how communist China is or how left-wing China is, but obviously there's been a lot of changes in Chinese society over the last 40, 50 years.
identification thing?
Well, that's clearly part of it. I mean, you're transgender. Don't you believe in self-identification?
I feel like when you're talking about political orientations, there needs to be substance behind it. I don't think it's
all right. They have a plan. They have a centrally planned economy. They've outlawed pretty much all other political parties. They've heavily suppressed traditional religious practices in favor of mandating a state materialist, or what I would consider essentially a state religion that is materialist in its outlook. It makes no claims of extra material properties, but it is, I would argue, religious in its nature. I would say all of those are extremely left-wing principles. They manipulate their own currency to an extreme degree. You know, we do that to some extent too, but nowhere near as much. And I wish we didn't manipulate our own currency.
But you believe in. You're a monarchist.
They do manipulate their own currency a lot, and that's part of the reason when people talk about the yuan, like challenging the dollar. Not only would the yuan need to first overtake the euro, because the yuan makes up 10% of the world's reserve currency, euro 20%, US dollar 59%, but also they manipulate it constantly. And if you're going to have a world reserve currency, people need to have confidence in what the value of that currency is going to be, and like manipulating it overnight for Chinese national state interest is not something that makes a good reserve currency. So I mean, the yuan as a challenging the dollar in that way is just not really possible, at least not in this lifetime, or at least in the next 30, 40, 50 years, unless there's a major change in policy and how they manage their currency.
So you're not necessarily against authoritarian governance.
I am a reactionary libertarian monarchist, and I will tell you this: if you look through history,
a reactionary libertarian monarchist. We're just putting words together? Is that what we're doing? We're just putting words together? Is that what we're doing? Okay, well, I am a socialist, nationalist, feminist, red pill, gay Nazi. That is my official ideology. You can put that on my Wikipedia page.
Most monarchic governments have been far less authoritarian.
Somebody in chat is a feudal communist. I like to have the type of ideological diversity here.
Than Republican governments. If we look at France, the republic that succeeded the monarchy carried out far more political killings, was far less tolerant of individual freedoms. We saw the same thing in Russia.
So he's saying that one regime that followed a monarchy was more repressive than the repressive regime that followed it. Well, I mean, like, I look at Batista. Batista's bad, and his authoritarianism is bad. The authoritarianism of Fidel Castro is also bad. But the thing is, we don't need to choose between just like, oh, well, monarchy compared to Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell has been dead for like 500 years. There's been a lot of people between Oliver Cromwell and today. There are other options. There are other societies that are not monarchies, that are democratic, that are more libertarian, that are more liberal, that give you more individual and political and civic freedoms. I mean, if you were to really look at the most authoritarian governments in the world, some of the most authoritarian governments, I mean, actually a lot of them are monarchies, particularly in the Gulf states, for example, like in Saudi Arabia.
Russia?
I know that the monarchy in Thailand is extremely repressive. It is still illegal to even insult the king there. And not to mention the fact that in the recent elections, in the style of system that, you know, he's asking for, that they had in Thailand, they just rejected the person who won the most votes because he wanted to challenge the monarchy. And this is the problem with monarchy. And trying to, you know, if the monarch holds anything outside of just a kind of ceremonial role and they can interfere with politics, it is an inherently anti-democratic institution that, if it challenges its interests in wealth or its power, even if it's better for the nation state, that's something that they get just by birth, isn't held by them, that type of power and influence, they're going to do everything they can to cling on to it, like is the case in Thailand.
We saw the same thing in China. The idea that monarchies are inherently authoritarian is just untrue. The most authoritarian governments in history have been Republican governments. If you look at Britain, the history of Britain,
the most authoritarian governments in history have been Republican governments. I mean, that's just not true. I mean, you would need to show me how, you know, Republican governments were more authoritarian than, say, the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany, or he would have to show me, like, you know, more evidence. Like, if I was to take all of what is classically considered like dictatorships and compare them to the Republican governments that exist today, which ones do you think are going to be more authoritarian? Like, let's be for real here. Like, when it comes to freedom to protest, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, which, by the way, is going to be a big problem in any feudal system that he wants to bring back. Like, he's got to, like, lay that out. That's a very big assertion to make, because most people who are in favor of Republican democracy, one of the reasons they're going to be in favor of it is because it's more free than the other alternatives.
Right, but the
most dictatorial leader in our history was a man named Cromwell. He was not a monarchist. He, in fact, killed a monarch and took over.
Just because one person wasn't a monarchist does not make them the representative for all Republican governments. Just like if I was to, for example, just use Saudi Arabia as the only representation for how a monarchy could be run, there's other ways monarchy can be run, like the UK right now, or other monarchies. But, like, Oliver Cromwell is not a good representation of, like, modern republicanism.
Over as a Republican leader.
How long has Oliver Cromwell been dead? Like 500 years, right? Oliver Cromwell. He has been dead, yeah, for about 500 years. About 400, 500 years.
He was the Republican leader, and that's, oh, well, at the time they used the word Commonwealth, but that's
350-ish? Okay, got you.
Something people tend to forget. Britain used to be a republic, and it was a dictatorial republic.
Okay. Right, but like
I don't think the idea that you've made, where you say
the king,
don't you like authoritarianism?
The king is covered by sovereign immunity. Like, he cannot commit a legal wrong. He's immune from civil or criminal proceedings. That is authoritarian.
Yes. Do you not have the exact same thing for your government? In fact, you have more than that, because
what do you mean my government? I live in Northern Ireland. We have the same king.
So then what are you complaining about?
Complaining about the fact that they're immune from the legal system.
Yes, but the exact same thing happens under Republican governments as well. That's a basic principle of separation of powers. And in fact, I would argue that republics are often go further than that. If we look at the United States of America, for example, which is a republic, we can agree, a democratic republic, in fact, a constitutional democratic republic, Hunter Biden is functionally immune to prosecution just because he's related to the current president.
There is currently a special counsel investigation into Hunter Biden, and Hunter Biden recently pled guilty to I believe federal gun charges, because he possessed a gun after he, you know, was known to be a drug addict, which is a crime. So that's just not true. If that was the case, he wouldn't have these cases against him in the first place, and he certainly wouldn't be pleading guilty.
I feel like this could easily be disproved by looking at Trump right now.
Notably, he's not president anymore. They didn't do this to him.
Does Keffals not know this information? I mean, I understand, like, the Hunter Biden story is, like, changed all the time, and it might be kind of daunting to look into it. But, like, I think this is an important point. Like, Trump never had Trump hasn't pled guilty to anything yet. Hunter Biden has.
A curd is a curd. Ben9224 got a tier 1 subscription.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Ben9224 * got a * tier 1 * subscription.
When I see those numbers at the end, I always wonder if they're just random or if they're supposed to represent something. I'm going to assume the 9224 is random in this instance, but even if it isn't, either way, thank you so much for the tier 1 sub and doing it on the website instead of in gutter chat, which is greatly appreciated. DylanBurns.tv for those who want to sub and donate.
While he was president, being president functionally made him immune to this. They're now doing it to stop him from being president again. Why?
Or it's because he committed crimes and they're holding him to account. And having somebody who has a tendency to try to overthrow the democratic results of an election, participating in more elections is kind of problematic. And so if he did do that, he probably shouldn't be participating in elections in the first place. The system holding him to account for his own crimes is how the system is supposed to work. Hey, maybe he doesn't like that because in a monarchy, the king can do whatever he wants. And, the judicial system holding the king to account is laughable.
Why are they so desperate to throw all these prosecutions at him? Because they know they'll have to stop if he becomes president. So you have explicitly a legalized political system in that country where those in power are immune from prosecution. Those out of power are subject to prosecution, whether or not they've done anything wrong. And I see your chat talking about impeachment, but your chat are ignorant fools because impeachment explicitly is not the same as being convicted of a criminal offence. Bill Clinton was impeached for raping Monica Lewinsky, but he doesn't have to join the sex offenders registry.
Wait, he raped Monica? Wait, what? Did he rape Monica Lewinsky? That's not how I remember the story. Now, maybe it's because I'm an American and I haven't revisited the story in a while. As far as I know, she gave him a blowy under the table. Under the table. Now, that's a lot. And you can say it's unprofessional and, it's not, it's not good idea. Whatever. You could, not that he's the first president to do something like that. If you like JFK, well, I've got some news for you. But as far as I know, he didn't rape her. And you say that's inappropriate for the president to do. It's bad to cheat on your wife. He didn't rape her.
He didn't have to go to prison or be fined. He doesn't even have a criminal record, even though it was found as a result of that impeachment that he was a rapist.
Dude, he's got to substantiate that. Is that... Look, I was not alive when this happened. This guy looks like he's from like 1880, so maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I don't know. But I do not remember that. I don't remember it. Wait, Donald Trump's back on Twitter. No, wait, are they trying to make this a W? They're trying to make this a W. Man, they can't, but they're gonna try. And look, he should have done a different face. He should have given like a thumbs up or something. Like something that would be like, aha, look, he has whimsy. You haven't broken him. This looks like a broken man.
Finally getting prosecuted is the result of actions that started while he was still president. The wheels started moving long before what is currently happening.
Oh, Snappy, you did tweet. DonaldJTrump.com. Election interference, never surrender. Did you just cook this up quick in Microsoft Paint? Oh, dude, we got the mug. Does this ship to Ukraine? I get this. I'd 100% get this. I told you guys it would be before the day's over. We'd see the first shirts and stuff.
The wheels don't take 3 years to turn, let's be honest.
I told you they'd put it on a shirt. I told you they'd put it on a shirt. I knew it. I knew it. If they were planning to put it on a shirt, why didn't they do a better shot? Whatever.
I don't agree with
now
you.
because they want to impact the upcoming election. Let's be honest, it doesn't take them 3 years to prosecute someone.
Yes, it does. It takes quite a long time to actually get the legal system to do anything, regardless of who it is.
doesn't seem to when it's just some ordinary person committing some ordinary offence, or allegedly committing some ordinary offence. Didn't take them nearly this long to go after, I'd say, that Kyle Rittenhouse bloke. I'm pretty sure it took them a lot less time than this. So the idea that they had that it's
Yeah, I think it's because people were dead.
simply took this.
And like there were like cameras of him like shooting at somebody. Like it was public footage.
Well, no, they wanted to do it now because now is when they think it will impact the election most.
I think that, by the way, this is the dumbest argument ever. Because let's say they immediately went after him right after the January 6 riots, or right after he called Brad Raffensperger and tried to intimidate them, or right after, like for those cases, if they immediately went after him, Trump would say, you guys haven't even done an investigation yet. You haven't even looked around, and now you're already coming after Trump. This is certainly just, you know, the personal vendetta of these Democrats and blah, blah, blah. Wait too long. And it's like, why'd you take so long? Why you just waited until the election? There was never a point between 2021 and today that they could have started these proceedings that people would have been like, oh, okay, that's fair. There was always going to be whining around it. Always going to be whining around it. If he didn't want his crimes to have an impact on his electability, maybe he should have thought of that before he committed those crimes.
So the idea that the monarch, the sovereign immunity of the monarch, is a bad principle or a bad idea, is functionally any system has to have that. If you don't have that, then you can't have meaningful separations of power. You can't have the judiciary be independent of the executive and the executive be independent of the judiciary unless the judiciary is unable to prosecute the executive. If the judiciary can prosecute the executive, then there's two possible outcomes. Either the executive takes control of the judiciary, or the judiciary becomes sovereign over the entire system.
Is he just learning what checks and balances is? I think he's getting to the core of what makes democratic systems good, or what makes Republican systems good and favored by most of the world, which has most of the money and resources and prosperity. But he's identifying what helps the system. So the sovereign, the executive, the head of state in this instance, can't go out of control and do whatever they want because they're checked by the judiciary. But you don't have lawyers controlling the whole country, so you have the chief executive and the representatives to try to legislate to deal with the issues while the judiciary keeps them in check. These are checks and balances. It shouldn't just be one part of the government dominates everything and they have control of everything. It'd be very easy, if that's the case, for things to get out of control and for them to run wild with nobody to reel them in. If there's no checks and balances on the chief executive, then what would stop the chief executive from just going around the entire democratic process and rejecting the people altogether? For example, Donald Trump. Donald J. Trump is somebody I think, if given the opportunity, would certainly reject the democratic process and keep himself in power. 2020 showed that. Under this system, where the monarch or the chief executive can just disregard the judiciary, disregard the legal processes, what stops them from just being power-hungry bastards?
There's no meaningful separation of powers when one branch of government can just throw the other branch in jail.
I do think there is. Well, it depends on what the other branch does. If the other branch of government doesn't commit any crimes, then it should be fine. If you commit crimes, then it isn't fine. As long as those, I understand about enforcing crimes selectively, but outside of that, the worst case scenario, in my opinion, is for one branch of government to think like there's no repercussions for whatever they do. It's not like the judiciary is held to a different standard. If you're a lawyer and you try to overthrow the government, you'll probably equally get arrested.
You have to have the executive be immune to the judiciary. No system has ever functionally managed to avoid that. That is the functional reality of any system of government. If you want a separation of powers and multiple co-equal branches of government, you can't have any one branch of government directly exert its authority upon another.
But
and as the authority,
they have to exert their authority over each other in order for there to be checks and balances. With no authority over each other, how are they going to check and balance each other? That's the whole point.
the judiciary is to find people guilty of crimes. It cannot be able to do that to the executive, otherwise it would be placing itself above the executive, or the executive would have to
Well, no, it's not placing itself above the executive. It's the executive actions had made it so it placed itself below the position that they hold. They're below the office if they commit crimes to a point where they can get arrested while in office. It is their own fault for violating what they're allowed to do in that position. There has to be rules and norms that officials are held to, or they'll just run wild. And that's what the judiciary is supposed to do. There has to be some norm that even monarchs follow.
take direct control of it. Because that's
the
the
King
only way
of
that
England
government
has the
possible.
power to dissolve Parliament.
Yes, he does.
I
He does
don't.
not have the power to pass laws.
Sorry, I'm so happy we capped all the monarchists, man. Could you imagine somebody like this guy in the United States telling us, like, buy more tea, pay more taxes? I understand my ancestors 100% now, man. I would have put on the Native American headdress no matter how many accusations of cultural appropriation I would have gotten, and thrown all that tea in the harbor if somebody like this guy came over here like, pay more taxes, no representation, serve the king. Yeah, no, that'll radicalize you real quick. I see it now. I can understand it. I can feel it in my bloodline.
Though he could dissolve Parliament, but then the moment he wanted to get a new spending bill passed, or he wanted to authorize new taxes to raise an army, he'd be forced to allow Parliament to reform. It's a series of checks and balances, not an ability to exert unilateral punishment on it. Notably, he can't stop someone from running for office again. If he dissolves Parliament, what does that mean? It means fresh elections are called. If the same people win their elections, he doesn't get to say, no, you can't run. He could threaten to indefinitely dissolve Parliament, but then he'd never be able to get any laws passed.
Right. I don't understand how you're trying to argue that a monarchic system is not inherently an authoritarian system.
Because plenty of monarchies throughout history have been significantly more free than many republics.
But now, if you're looking at the more free societies in the world, is it the ones that have more of the features of republican governments, or the ones that have more of the features of monarchic control? It'd be republican governments. And the monarchies that we could point to are monarchies where the monarch has basically no authority or is just a figurehead. Literally, like, they turn to the camera, say, pip, pip, cheerio, praise the queen, and that's like all they do for society. I mean, they might give to charity or whatever, but they're not the ones writing the legislation. They're not the ones, like, going out there and enforcing the laws, and they're not saying, if you insult the king, you shall be beheaded. Like, that's... And the ones that try to do that, or try to, like, strike a more balanced approach, and I mean an actual balanced approach between monarchical control and democratic society, Thailand is the society that I would point to. And that society right now is showing through the fact that the person who won the most votes is not going into the position of power because of the monarchy-aligned senators that have been put into a position of power just because of their alignment with the monarchy. They're stopping it. It's showing that, like, once you give the king and the institution of the monarchy enough influence to have that type of power over the system, they're going to try to undercut the Democrats every single time. They're going to try to undercut the Republicans. So in the systems that are, I mean, closer to a balanced structure, like not completely monarchy control, but it's more balance between monarchy control and republicanism. I mean, like, all of it would just be better if they just had more Republican control. Whatever. Peer review, thank you for the tier 1 being sub for 2 months. It feels weird just debating, like, this is why a person should not be born into wealth and power. This is why, just because someone was born into it, they're not necessarily the best person to run the country. Like, I don't know. It feels like I've gone back 300 years.
Why do you think monarchies are inherently authoritarian? And if you do think that, why would you have left a republic to come and live under a monarchy?
I never lived in a republic. I'm from Canada. I lived in a monarchy and then I moved to a different monarchy.
I don't
Is it a different monarchy or the same monarchy?
think Canada had a monarch as head of states.
We have a king, the King of Canada.
Do they have a King of Canada? Do they? Oh, they're... No, I mean, it's Charles III. It's the same person. Okay, gotcha.
Is he still? I thought you guys got independence in 1982.
Oh, well, we're still a
They're different crowns held by the same person? Got you.
constitutional monarchy. We have...
So it's like those North Korean generals that have like a different little, like different medals on them. Okay, got you.
the Queen on our currency. We have the royal anthem. We are part of the Commonwealth.
Oh, so you are.
Yep.
Okay, so you did. So you left one monarchic government to go and live under another. Why not go to live in a republic?
Well,
Say the Republic of
I
Ireland. You had two islands you could have gone to. You chose to go to the monarchic one.
well, you know, it's not to say well.
Like, if you look at the, like, if I was to talk about any reason why I'd want to move to the UK, maybe I'd talk about like health insurance or something like that. None of the reasons why I would move to the UK would have anything to do with the monarchy. And I think the same thing would be true about Keffals. In fact, if I was to give reasons I would move to the UK, eventually I would get to the civil liberties portion, stuff like that. And most of the things would probably be related to republicanism in some way, or some idea of like liberalism, or like a liberal interpretation of how judicial systems should be run. It would not be because of there's a monarchical head of state. And I think if you talk to most people who move to the United Kingdom today, they'll probably give you maybe not a similar answer when it comes to like civil liberty and stuff like that. Maybe it'll be more economic motivated, like motivated by wanting to get jobs and stuff like that. Even though if you look at the British economy, maybe a little less so. I don't know of anyone who's moving to the United Kingdom for the king.
Always be monarchic here.
No, you will be if you know what's good for you.
Whoa. I try and stay out of the politics here because I don't want to brick through my window, but you know,
Yeah, do you know what's generally cut down on the window bricking? The fact that there is a non-partisan head of state. Do you want?
Well, there's actually currently no, at least in Northern Ireland, there's no head of...
Are we really going to say that the monarchy is nonpartisan? I don't really know much about the monarchy, but when I do hear about the monarchy, it's all like family drama and like this family member hates this family member. Something to do with Meghan Markle. I don't know anything about it. I'm not interested in it. I don't care if the family wears like expensive jewelry and calls themselves the king. I don't know why I should pay attention. I view it very similar to how I would view like keeping up with the Kardashians, right? If I was to keep up with the kings and the queens. But as far as I know, from a distance, it doesn't look nonpartisan. I mean, I understand how a figure can be uniting. I understand that. You don't even need to be a king, though, for that to be the case. Like Mannerheim of Finland was somebody who I think was definitely a very uniting figure for many Finns. You can find other political figures like that in history. Winston Churchill, probably an example. But these are political figures. I can understand the appeal of a nonpartisan head of state. But is it necessarily even nonpartisan?
Of state because they don't...
And like, what makes it different than like just a country's mascot at that point, right? Because when you talk about a monarchy, I don't think when people like all the monarchs of old would say being basically a nation's mascot, which is what we're talking about now, is the same as being like a true monarch.
They can't form government here.
That's head of government you're thinking of. Head of state is the monarch.
Right.
So that's exactly. Do you want that level of dysfunction to also extend to the head of state? given how dysfunctional the government in Northern Ireland is, would you want that level of partisanship to extend to the head of state as well? The big benefit of having a monarchy, one of the big benefits, is that you get to have a non-partisan head of state.
I mean,
I think a very good thing to do.
The UK is in an abysmal place compared to even the Republic. Leaving the EU, Brexit was such a mistake. They have seen like
Why was it a mistake? Our people voted for it. We had a direct referendum.
And all of the polls that have come out since then have shown that people would not vote for it again because of the economic turmoil that's resulted from it. It's also caused like the reason why there's no government in Northern
it was like more than 60% of Brits would now vote against leaving the EU.
Ireland is because the Unionist Party is mad about the Irish sea border that resulted from Brexit.
True. That wasn't even something that was discussed when Brexit was happening. Nobody even thought about the Good Friday Agreement when that came up, even though it's, I think, a pretty obvious problem when you look at it like after the fact. But I guess nobody had the forethought, really, or very few people had the forethought outside of people in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland voted to stay in the EU. I wonder why.
That is the price of living in a democracy. People sometimes make decisions that are unpopular, but that is, and I would argue, a direct counter-argument against the idea that monarchies are undemocratic. You have this wonderful tool that can boost the amount of democracy if there's ever not enough of it, and it's called a referendum. You don't need a democratic government. If you want people to have a say, you can just put the issue directly to a vote.
I mean,
fact,
yeah.
You could make a solid claim that we're more democratic than many countries.
Because you can do referendums in republics as well.
How often do they do? They almost never do, though. You talked about China. When has Red China, ever had a referendum? When has the USA ever had a referendum?
We have referendums quite frequently, at least on the state level. Not a lot on the national level, but a lot more on the state level. I know I voted in favor in my state recently in favor of marijuana legalization, and it won with over 60% of the vote, and marijuana is now legal in my home state of Maryland, which I'm very, very excited to return to.
How often do republics have referendums, Keffals? I think they almost never do.
When do republics have referendums? The most recent referendum that I can think of in a republic was in Cuba on the most recent constitutional reform, and that was in like 2019. But I feel like there's quite a few examples of republics that do referendums. 2022 Kansas abortion referendum.
Kansas is in the USA, but it's a state there. Is Kansas itself a republic? Is there a king of Kansas?
Is there a king of Kansas?
I understand that it's part of the USA, which is a republic, but individual states are allowed to have different types of governments. Is Kansas itself?
And out of all 50 of our governments, not a single one has chose monarchy.
A monarchy?
Not a single one has determined, you know that thing we had before? Let's go back to that.
I do not believe so. But it does have a governor, so it does have its own independent government.
Yes, so how does the governor take power? Does he ascend to the rank of governor when his father dies, or?
Why is that the ideal outcome? I think that's my biggest question. Why is a governor...
Does he ascend to the rank of governor when when his father dies?
It's based on bloodline ideal.
So I'm just imagining, like, I'm from Maryland, like Larry Hogan's children, Martin O'Malley's children. I mean, Martin O'Malley's kid isn't that bad. I've seen him on Twitter. He's not too bad. But, oh, God, what a terrible system. Could you imagine, like, Chris Christie's kid, Donald Trump's children? Yeah, I just get to be president. I'm sorry. Like, oh.
There is no such thing as an ideal government when we're talking about humans. There's only the least worst or least dysfunctional.
Then again, Joe Biden's president now. You know what that would mean? If Joe Biden kicked the bucket. Hunter Biden. We get the Hunter Biden regime. Okay. You know, maybe he's winning me over. He's winning me over.
It's ideal because it protects the organs of the state from...
Could you imagine the narco state of Hunter Biden? Oh, my God. Oh my goodness, that would make a good book.
From partisanship. You don't want every system of the.
You're sneaky. I caught that Winston Churchill quote.
I wasn't thinking of it at the time, but yes. But what was it? That democracy is the best form of government. It is the worst form of government, except for all the others that have been tried from time to time. Yeah, you could always count on them to reach the right conclusion. So they've tried all the others.
Yeah, I definitely would not take his opinion seriously, though, considering his part in the Bengal Famine.
Okay, Bluestone is saying the Constitution forbids titles of nobility. Governor is not a title of nobility. If he was calling himself the Duke of Kansas, yeah, that would be a problem.
The Duke of... Dude, can I be the Duke of Maryland? Can that be my new official title? The Duke of Maryland? I would love that, man. And I mean, hey, I come from Prince George's County. Prince George's? I mean, look, I feel like I'm perfect for the role. Just saying. I've got the long hair of like a Spanish prince. Yeah, I think it could work.
All right.
Also, famine.
I mean, the question was just about referendums. I mean, no, the United Kingdom under Winston Churchill was exporting food while there was a famine in Bengal.
While there was also a world war.
Well, India was under colonial rule by the United Kingdom. The monarchy has served such a horrendous role in world history.
The
thing that's interesting, because I don't hear really anyone defend the Bengal famine anymore, unless usually just British nationalists. I don't really know of anybody of any other political persuasion that'll do it. Sometimes, maybe not the Bengal famine specifically, but I'll see sometimes American conservatives defending the monarchy, which extremely strange when you're an American conservative. But when you talk about the Bengal famine, his defense is that there was a war going on. Well, what did the state of Bengal have to do? What did India, what did any of Asia and the Asian people who were fighting in the war, what did any of them had to do between the British and German and French fighting in Europe? What did they have to do with that? What did they gain from it? What were they contributing to? Were they contributing to some greater ideal of, state sovereignty or democracy or their own prosperity? No. Their people were starving for a cause that didn't affect them and they didn't care about. They keep calling it, I know it's Bangladesh. I'm just calling it Bengal because it's called the Bengal famine, but yes, it's Bangladesh.
You prefer the India that existed before colonialism?
Yes, actually.
Which one?
Which one?
There was no
the Japanese were invading, right? We're talking about one second. Give me a moment before I say something very ignorant. Okay, gotcha. The Japanese were invading. They did have an interest in pushing back the Japanese. That is true. But at the end of the day, if the people are starving to death, they can't fight back the Japanese. If the people are starving to death, they're going to look at Japanese occupation possibly differently. If the people are starving to death, that's going to turn them against your administration. It's probably a contributing factor as to the fact why Indians, people in Bangladesh, didn't want to be part of the British Empire after the fact. Like, the whole reason the Japanese were being fought in the first place is because we believed their rule was brutal. The rule was brutal, they were expansionists, they were brutes in Asia. We needed to stop them. And then we act as brutish? Maybe not as brutish overall, but exporting food from a country actively engaged in a famine, that sounds like something that Hirohito and Tojo would do. And that's when India was already contributing so much to the war effort. Millions of soldiers. It's just really messed up.
There was no such country as India prior to colonialism. Technically speaking, there really wasn't after colonialism because it fractured into India and Pakistan. If it had been...
And when I say they weren't fighting for a greater value, what I mean is, was this a fight for Indian independence? Was this a fight for Indian democracy? Was this a fight? There's so much that isn't like like once the war is won, what does India and Bangladesh get? Is my point.
Perhaps a little bit more honest and called itself and said India fractured into Pakistan and Hindustan, which is what some people had called.
Wait, are you
time.
defending like British colonialism right now?
Yes.
As a net
Keffals,
positive?
yes, I am.
How are you how do you justify that? Like,
Why does India have a parliament?
why does India
What do you think its system of government was before we came along? And the answer is it was no one system of government. India only became a single unified state.
And why
with
is
things
that the
like
preferred?
parliament.
Why is a single unified state the preferred position for India? That was
Because if
something
it
that was
wasn't, there would be
imposed on them.
There
That
would be no
wasn't.
such country as India. Gandhi's dream of we should have today a free India.
I don't like that. I don't like that. Well, since India is the world we live in today, the world is better because we have the India that exists currently. Well, is that true? I mean, I don't want to get too much into the genocide that was perpetrated in Bangladesh, but I mean, there was a lot of slaughtering and murdering that was perpetrated in Bangladesh when the Bangladeshis wanted to have their own sovereignty, wanted to have their own country. So, was the India that was drawn up after the British left the best version of India? If that version ended up with murders and deaths and slaughters and stuff like that, I find it weird that we know for sure that the best version of India and Bangladesh the world could have is the one that the British left after they were extracting its food during a famine. Maybe if those people were alive, India could have prospered even more, and Bangladesh could have prospered even more.
Would literally have been impossible to implement.
Like, just because it's the world we live in, that shouldn't be assumed that therefore that is the best outcome.
Before colonialism, he'd have had to get every individual principality to agree to it, and there's no way they would have, because it would have required those individual princes to give up way too much power. And if we're being honest,
Was there a political movement towards a unified India before British colonialism even?
no.
Then why is that something that matters if that wasn't something that existed before a post-colonial India even existed?
Because if you're going to celebrate the Indian nation, say, oh, the Indian nation should be free, there couldn't be an Indian nation without the British colonialism.
They would simply be celebrating something else.
Right, but that's something that was imposed on them.
Or maybe there would be like a different type of India, or would have formed maybe into a single state or something resembling modern India through different means.
Yes, much as how the idea of a central British state was imposed
Like
upon
we're just talking alternative history scenarios. We have no clue.
us by the Romans. We were several smaller microstates until Rome came along. The light of civilization is often spread by the sword. It's unfortunate, but very often...
The light of civilization. Dog, this came out right out of like a... this comes right out of 1870, 1880, white man's bird, and you can feel it.
There's no alternative.
No, there is an alternative, because you're making it sound like the project... You're making it sound like the project behind colonialism by the crown was bringing civilization, but it was about extracting resources from the colonies.
Can I just address someone in your
Yes,
comment,
of
Mr.
course.
Carlin Cole? Genocide was good, actually. What makes you think colonialism was genocidal? Colonialism has not been, I would say, generally genocidal. There's one major instance I can think of a colonial government committing genocide, and that was Germany in Namibia, where it genocided
The Bengal
people.
Famine was an act of genocide committed by the government of the United Kingdom.
That's going a bit far, I think.
It is recognized as a genocide by the government of India.
By the way, do we have to use the word genocide? Like, it doesn't even matter if it meets the barrier of the word genocide. I feel like people like to use certain words to describe things because they're like punching in their heart. The mass starvation of people is bad in its own right, whether it crosses the barrier into genocide or not. Definitely when you're exporting the food that could be used to feed those people that are starving to death. Like, in and of itself, that's terrible, right? Just like if somebody was to sit me down and debate me on the Holodomor and say, this is why, even if it was evil, it wasn't a genocide, same thing applies. Not talking about the merits of the argument, I'm just saying, in and of itself, what we know, remove that type of descriptor, it's still horribly evil. For example, Belgian colonialism in the Congo is some of the most horrific Hitler-esque shit you will ever read about. The chopping off of hands because they don't meet rubber plantation quota. Go look it up yourself. The millions upon millions who died. The culling of the population. If somebody went there with the intent to engage in genocide, I do not think that the outcome would have been that different. I honestly think that if the Nazis got colonial African possessions, it would probably be similar to how the Belgians ran the Congo.
I respectfully disagree with the government of India.
Based on what? Like, what are you basing that on? Like, are you actually going to defend what the British did in Ireland? They didn't bring
in Ireland?
The reason why the political situation is like it is because of the British. It's not because of the Irish. If you look at the Republic, it is significantly more peaceful than the North.
That doesn't seem entirely fair, isn't it? Given that a lot of the separatist movements were founded by people down south. The North is not calling for the South to become monarchic, but the South is calling for the North to become Republican. The South is the one not willing to leave well enough alone.
No. The call for joining the Republic is happening from inside the North. I don't think there have been any modern statements, at least since the peace process, of calls from the Republican government of the Republic of Ireland for the North to join them.
They literally do have that that saying, was it, they want all 38 counties? Or is it all 32 counties? That is quite a popular Republican saying there. And furthermore, that whole, we're not...
Dude, okay, I'm sorry. I feel like we've watched 23 minutes of this. We get the idea, okay? We've got the gimmick. I don't think this is going to go anywhere else. I don't think we're going to get anything new.